Greetings, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Okay, that's hopefully everyone's doing good. I am glad you are tuning in. This is probably going to be a two-parter, because I've got a lot of stuff to cover, and it's it's going to be quite lengthy between these two videos. So I'm just going to have to, just bear with me. But this is going to go under the title of the Know Your Enemy playlist. So if you want to review these two videos, I'll probably release the second one probably tomorrow sometime. But again, it's going to have a lot to do with um, exposure. I'm it's the first part is going to be talking about. I'm going to play two true news clips. I'm going to play one full hour one, and I'm going to play a part like 5 minutes of one other one from True News. I'll post a link below so you can check out that site out. He posts news articles every day. Um, it's pretty good information. Um, but I mean, again, you got to be careful on how you decipher these things because again, these are worldly sources, but um, there's still a need of vigilance that we need to ponder. Um, this isn't really going to deal with the constant rumors of wars that are going on. This is mainly going to be dealing with symbolism and one particular symbol that might, and I'm not saying it's going to, I'm saying it could, for significant reasons, play a role as far as a global currency. And I will get into that in more detail in the next video. But pay attention to the one phrase that Rick Wiles uses in this 5 minute beginning of this um, radio broadcast. And then I'm going to take you to another radio broadcast. I'm going to play the full thing from January 16th. Okay? Um, and then after those are done, I'm going to give myself a break. And I am going to continue on with the in-depth research and we're going to be diving into the symbolisms and everything like that. And it's mainly going to be focused on the dollar bill, and there's a lot of stuff that you've heard about this thing, but there might be some things you have not heard. So in a way, it's kind of a remembrance, and it has to deal with Zionism. It has to deal with um, Jews, one who call themselves Jews but are not, of the synagogue of Satan. Judaism, which really is a mixture of um, the law and the Talmud. It's kind of a mixture of both. Okay, and that's basically what Judaism is. All right, and we're gonna get into that. Um, it's all gonna be part of the second video. But for this video, I'm gonna play you these two clips, and and in the following video, which hopefully I can get to tomorrow or the following day, I will wrap up this whole thing. And like I said, it's probably going to be anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours worth of watching, because it goes into great detail. When you expose stuff like this, it's I mean, it goes into great detail, and symbolism is like a language. You can understand the language, you can know your enemy, and you can be prepared spiritually for the things that are coming. Okay, that's the whole reason why I'm doing this, and hopefully it will strengthen you guys a little more, or it will bring some of you up to speed who have not heard this before, and so forth. But without further ado, I want to play this first clip from January 30th on Monday. This program here, I'm just going to play the intro to it, And then I'm going to go to the full hour one from Monday, January 16th, where he had a guest by the name of Jim Willie from www.goldenjackass.com. Okay? No, I did not swear there. It's a donkey. If guys get offended, I'll say golden donkey, okay? But anyway, I'm going to play this intro here, and I'm going to play the other one. And that will be basically the intro to this two-part series here. But pay attention to that one key phrase, and I will repeat it after he's done. Alright? Okay, here it is.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Monday, January 30, 2012. Is the perfect storm brewing in 2012? European leaders have, so far, failed to reach a deal with creditors to avert a messy Greek default before March 20th. The Federal Reserve admitted last week that the U.S. economy is stalled in the basement. Japan is in a severe deflationary spiral and attempting to recover from a triple disaster last year. And China's overheated economy is cooling down fast. Meanwhile, tensions between the West and Iran are heating up fast to an all-time high. Together, the geopolitical and economic atmospheric conditions are ripe to converge into a perfect storm this year. I pray that this storm dissipates and goes away, that we get through this year without this storm. But I'm simply giving you, as an end-time weatherman, my reading of the geopolitical and economic atmospheric conditions as of today, the end of January 2012. I want to go over several matters. First, let's start with the stunning statement that a high-level banking source told Jim Willie recently. And by the way, if you have not listened to every program on True News in the past month, you have missed some incredible interviews. I mean, this program has put forth some triple A information for our audience that I hope you comprehend the depth of the information that is being given to you. We've interviewed some pretty big hitters in the past month. We had billionaire Jim Rogers on the program. Robert Prechter from Elliott Wave, Jim Willie, a number of extremely well-informed men have been on this program in the past month and have given us some advice that, quite frankly, folks, 99.9% of the public never hears this type of information. The question is, what do you do with the information? What are you doing with it? You're privy to information that most of the public doesn't hear. Well, anyhow, let's go back to what this high-level banking source told Jim Willie. Mr. Willie was on the program about 2 weeks ago. Now, there was a lot of stuff that Mr. Willie spoke to me about on the telephone before the interview that I can't divulge because he simply said, look, this stuff is too dangerous. Things are so hot in the world right now. There are just certain topics we just can't talk about on the radio because of endangering the sources who are passing on information to him. So I will honor his request. I'm not going to. I never divulge on the program what guests tell me off the record. But the source, I will tell you this, is the same man who tipped him off in 2008 that Lehman Brothers would collapse. In fact, the source told Mr. Willie in 2008 that Lehman Brothers would be brought down in a controlled implosion. In other words, it wasn't an accident. The powers that be deliberately brought down Lehman Brothers. Remember that? They bailed out the other companies, and then they allowed Lehman Brothers to go down, and the crash of Lehman Brothers set off a chain reaction of financial wrecks. His source said it was deliberate. Lehman Brothers was brought down deliberately. Well, anyhow, the same source who has given Mr. Willie tips and insight and advanced knowledge that has been spot on every time. The same source told him earlier this month, quote, Europeans do not see what is coming. Watch for February 21st and then again for March 20th as turning point dates. The United States of America could very well cease to exist in the way you have known it after that date. February 21st is to be a date where this planet will get a fresh new program downloaded. This will mark the beginning of a monumental cleansing process that will not be over until it is done. This will embrace and engulf all and everything and everyone, he said.
Okay, before I continue, I just wanted to say that, okay, we do have dates mentioned here, okay? I'm not a big fan of date setting. I never have been. But I can kind of see where this is going. And the main focus is to have your hearts prepared spiritually, have your hearts right with God. Not to panic, not to be in fear, because a lot of times date setting is based on fear. Something could happen on February 21st, and something could happen on March 30th, I think he said. But let's not just go too crazy with this. Oh, February 21st is going to be a huge thing, because people are saying December 21st is a Mayan calendar end of the world. I myself was caught up in the whole Elenin thing, and I was looking at these graphs, 26th, 27th, 28th of September 2011. Something's going to happen. And, and I was guilty of putting that fear out there, okay? And I apologized for that a while ago. But the key thing is not so much focus on the date, but to pay attention of the surroundings and what could possibly be going on behind the scenes as we get to know our enemy, or know your enemy, okay, and know what the powers that be is planning on doing. That's what I want you to understand. Don't just run with this date. Don't just take this date and just run with it, okay? Just keep it as an afterthought. Mark it on your calendar or whatever, but don't look for a huge event. Just be prepared for something, possibly. Just make sure you have your hearts right with your Creator, with Yahweh. That's the main focus. Alright, I'm going to get back to this.
The source went on to tell Mr. Willie that most likely there will be a bank holiday and or martial law, which will begin with a Greek default by March. Again, March 20th is the drop-dead date for Greece. They have billions of dollars of loans that have to be rolled over by that date. They don't have the money to do it. They don't have any. There are no willing idiots in line to loan them more money. And unless the European Union bails them out, there will be a default. And I think everyone expects Greece to default sometime between now and March 20th. Now listen to what this source told Mr. Willie. The Europeans don't see what's coming. February 21st and March 20th will be turning point dates. The USA could very well cease to exist in the way you have known it after that date. February 21st is the date where this planet will get a fresh new program downloaded. What does that mean? I've heard speculation for the past year or so, actually about 2 years, that there have been secret meetings going on around the world to plan for a post-dollar world. That there would be that all the currencies of the world will be revalued or reset. Let me put it like that, not revalued. But all the currencies of the world will be reset simultaneously on the same day. Some currencies will be revalued up. Some currencies will be devalued down. Again, it's just stuff I've heard from various sources over the past 2 years. So possibly that's what this planetary program download is going to be, the introduction of a new monetary system. I remember, when was it? I'm trying to remember. I'm going to say June of 2011. So, I'm starting to forget dates and times when these things happen. Augusto Perez called me. And you know what? It had to be earlier than that because we bought this building in June of 2011, so it was much earlier than that. It must have been in early 2011 because I remember where I was at when he called. So it could have been winter or spring of 2011. We had not yet found this building here in Vero Beach, and Susan and I were out driving around trying to find a place to live and a place to park this ministry. And Augusto Perez called me and he told me that the Lord had spoken to him and told him that a meeting would be held that's right, he said the meeting would be held, I believe, in June of 2011, and it would set the stage for the New World Order to be introduced in 2012. So perhaps that's what this is talking about, the source who said a fresh new program will be downloaded for the planet. He said this will mark the beginning of a monumental cleansing process that will not be over until it's done. Well, cleansing of what? Debt? That's what it is. The cleansing of debt. I've been predicting for years there's going to be a debt jubilee. Now somehow we're headed towards a global monetary system that will be backed by gold. I am convinced that the New World Order currency will be gold backed. And I believe this currency may be called the Phoenix. You might want to write this down, that Rick Wiles said this today on January 30th, 2012. someday there's going to be a gold-backed global currency called the Phoenix. Well, anyhow, the source told him the USA could very well cease to exist in the way you have known it after that date. And again, the source said there will be a bank holiday and or martial law, which will begin with a Greek default by March. Well, February 1st is Wednesday. February is going to go by very fast, and we're going to be in the March before you know it. Now, second, I was talking with Miles Ford last Friday afternoon, and Miles and Phyllis Ford lead the Carpenter's Touch Ministry in Dallas-Fort Worth. I had received a text from Miles while I was working on last Friday's program, and so after the program I called Miles, and he and I were talking about the global financial mess, and I told him what Jim Willey's source said, and he was really amazed to hear that statement. And Miles said, "Rick, did you read the prophecy the Lord gave my wife Phyllis at the end of 2011? I said, "No." He said, you really need to read it. Now, I don't have time to read the entire thing here today. It's posted on their website, carpenterstouch.org. And she posted it on January 1st, 2012, so you have to scroll down till you find it, but it's quite lengthy. And it contains both warnings and consolation from the Lord. But I want to read to you one section from that prophecy. Again, the Lord gave this to Phyllis sometime in, I believe, December 2011. Here's what the Lord said to her. The financial world will drastically change as you know it now. New forms of financing will come and go. Now listen to this. February will be the month that many banks will go belly up. And there will be a shock that will impact this region. Many will ask how it could happen in the midst of the things that seem to be in recovery. From the beginning of the year up to February, the markets will fluctuate with drastic highs and lows. The Lord said to her, eventually, even countries that were looked upon as being stable will collapse under the waves and waves of financial darkness. Then the financial systems will come to a halt, and world economists with great financial minds will meet to attempt to come up with solutions, only to find that no one has the ability to bail out the other. New systems will cease to remedy the situations. There will be bartering and trading to try and lighten the problems they will be facing. It goes on to say, anger will rise up at the leadership as to how and why did the leaders of this nation and other nations allow them to get into their current conditions. This will lead to more uprisings, frustration, and fear. Violence will begin to crop up in various places, and lives will be lost because of fear and famine. There will be first world countries with third world crisis, with the United States right in the very midst. The Lord said, help will come forth in the midst of even this kind of trouble because of everyday people with hearts of compassion that will rise up to help others, those who were diligent and stored before the time of famine. They will come together and work through some solutions. They will rise up through the land, and they will bear up one another with love and strength so that many won't fall by the wayside. They will become families to others who have no families and will share what they have stored up. Okay, now listen. I'm just putting these two things together. You've got Jim Willie's source, a banking source, a high-level banking source in Europe, who told him earlier this month that somewhere between February 21st and March 20th, there will be, these two dates will be turning point dates in history. The USA may cease to exist as you have known it. A new planet, the planet will get a new program downloaded, will mark the beginning of a monumental cleansing process. It will not stop until it's done. It will embrace and engulf all and everything. A bank holiday, martial law, begins with the Greek default by March. Phyllis Ford did not know about this statement because this statement was given to Jim Willie after the Lord gave her this prophecy at the end of 2011. When I asked Miles, or when I told Miles about the statement, he was shocked and amazed. He hadn't heard it. He had not even listened to that True News program. He didn't know that Jim Willie was on the program and said this to us. I'm telling him, you need to go listen to True News. I gave him the date, and he says, you need to go to our website and read Phyllis's prophecy. You put the two together. The Lord told her in December 2011, February will be the month that banks will go belly up. The financial world will drastically change as you know it. And it goes on to talk about how the world leaders will be befuddled. They won't know what to do. There'll be violence. There will be first world countries with third world crisis, with the United States right in the very midst. But the good thing about it is the people of God who had stored, prepared, knew this day was coming, and they're going to help each other. God's people are going to help get others through this crisis. So this is going to be a great time to witness to others about Jesus Christ and to tell them that Jesus Christ is coming back. So don't be afraid about all this. And it's not going to be a picnic, but it's going to be a wonderful time to enlarge the kingdom of God. Because you and I already knew this was coming. I mean, what is fear? Fear is something happening that you didn't know was going to happen. Well, you and I knew this was going to happen, so we shouldn't have any fear. We should be bold and courageous in the Lord. We should be kind and compassionate to people. I mean, we're not going to go out there and point our fingers and say, let me tell you why this has happened to you. No, we have to do it with gentleness and love. But a lot of people are going to be listening. A lot of people are going to be listening to us. For the first time, you might get your brother-in-law's attention for the first time. Some of your relatives may actually sit down and listen to what you've got to say. Okay, now, the third thing I want to read to you again is the prophecy given to the late Pastor David Wilkerson about 20 years ago. I've read this many times over the years. And I'm telling you, right now, as what we're watching taking place in Greece, this is the first time since I've done this radio program, since 1999. I don't know, I've lost track of how many times I have read this David Wilkerson prophecy over these 13 and a half years. Because I probably have read it once or twice a year for 13 and a half years. But this is the first time I've actually seen the conditions in place that this prophecy could come true. Again, this is a prophecy the Lord gave David Wilkerson about 20 years ago. early 1990s. He said very soon a European or North African or Eastern nation is going to default on its international loans. And when that happens, within 2 weeks, Mexico is going to default. He said Mexico owes $100 billion, most of it to American banks. And here is what is going to happen. About 2 weeks after the first country goes bankrupt, we are going to survive that because most of that money is owed to European banks, German, Swiss, and French banks. Now let me just stop right there. Guess who? Guess which banks are in deep doo-doo to Greece and Italy and Spain with their government debt? German banks, Swiss banks, and French banks. I mean, he hit the three of them right there on the head. That's it. Those are the three that are in deep trouble right now. If Greece and Spain and Italy, Portugal go under. Okay, so the Lord told David Wilkerson, 2 weeks after the first country goes bankrupt, we are going to survive that because most of the money is owed to the European banks, German, Swiss, and French banks. The second country is going to go down probably will be Argentina or Brazil, and we will kind of live that out, and people will settle down and say, well, maybe it's not going to hurt. But 2 weeks after the first country goes down, Mexico is going to default on $100 billion. And when the banks open the next day at 9 a.m., $15 billion an hour is going to be withdrawn from our American banks. They are going to be running our banks, the Arabs, all the Latin American countries, they are going to be running our banks, and before the day is over, the United States is going to have to declare a bank holiday. And we are going into 6 months of the worst hell America has ever seen. There's going to be chaos. Not even the National Guard is going to be able to quiet it down. We're going to have to call out the whole United States Army. And he went on to say, now I've had visions recently, for I've been in New York City and I was in Macy's in the vision, and I saw people walking around stunned because they couldn't get their money out of the bank. Now I'm going to give you a word of advice. The first country that goes bankrupt, and he said, I've documented this and I've got it sealed in an envelope, and I'm going to call all my friends, and I'm telling you, this is the first time I've said it in a public meeting, but the first country that bellies up, you get every dime you have. Church, get your money out of the bank, because you've got 2 weeks before there's going to be a bank holiday, and you won't be able to get a dime for 6 months. Now, of course, there is going to be order restored, but the nation will never be like this again. There is going to be fear like we've never known. Judgment is at the door. Pastor Wilkerson said, when I was at Macy's store in the vision, I watched people walking around stunned. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know what was happening. Then a bunch of young people walked into Macy's and suddenly went wild and began to steal within an hour. Everybody, I saw their spirit, everybody in that store, they were robbing and stealing. They raped Macy's and destroyed all 5 floors of Macy's. It was raped and ruined in a period of an hour or two, and this was just the beginning. And then he held up his Bible and he said, folks, it is all in this book. We have been warned and warned and warned. You can't tell me God hasn't warned us. You can't tell me God isn't saying something awesome here tonight in this church. He is saying something awesome to us, and we better get our prayer life straightened up, our lives straightened up, get rid of the idols, as Paul writes, and start seeking the face of God in holiness, or you are not going to be ready for what is coming. You're going to run around trying to make things right. You're going to run around saying, what happened? What's happening? What's happening? No, folks, God is warning. Get ready, and you will not fear these things that come upon you, that come onto you, and you will start rejoicing. You will not be afraid because your hands are clean. And you've been praying, and God is building a wall of fire around you to keep you. He said, I'm not preaching a message of fear. I am saying that the enemy is at the gate. Get ready. He is calling for a holy, sanctified people. Now, I want to run by this real fast because I only have a few minutes here. The key points First country that defaults on its loans will either be European, Northern African, or Eastern. A second country will default, most likely a Latin American country. Mexico will quickly default. They'll follow quickly in default. All of this will happen in a span of 2 weeks. When the first country defaults, you will have 2 weeks to get your money out of the banking system. The day after Mexico defaults, there will be a run on the U.S. banks by wealthy Arabs and other foreign bank depositors who will be stampeding to withdraw their dollars to cover their losses in other nations. See, that's what's going to bring our banks down. Wealthy foreigners withdrawing massive amounts of money to cover their losses in other countries. He said the USA will survive the storm but never be the same. He said God the Creator is admonishing people to repent, remove the idols, seek the Lord in holiness. He said a bank holiday will be declared. 6 months of the worst hell we've ever seen. Banks closed for 6 months. Chaos, troops in the street, the whole U.S. Army called out. Flash mobs raiding stores and malls. I got to tell you, I was reminded of a prophecy given even years earlier by Dumitru Duduman entitled America Will Burn. And he said he saw from the middle of the country, he saw a disturbance in the heartland in the middle of the country. He said he saw people fighting against the government, and the government was busy with internal problems. And then he said, then from the ocean, from Cuba, Nicaragua, from Mexico, and 2 more countries, he said, I don't know where they were. He said they will bomb the nuclear warehouses. When they explode, America will burn. Pastor Dudeman asked the angel, what will you do with the church? How will you save those who've turned towards you? The angel said, tell them this, how I saved the 3 young men in the furnace of fire, and how I saved Daniel in the lion's den, is the same way I will save them. My friend, put your trust in the Lord God of Israel. Hide in Christ, and He will protect you. I'm Rick Wiles. We'll take a break. I'll be back with my guest.
Okay. Alright, so you had, you got some interesting claims going on there. Well, the one with David Wilkerson was actually pretty interesting. But there was another prophecy mentioned. And you gotta keep this in mind. You gotta store this because, again, it was revolving a date. There was a time frame. Okay, and no offense to Augusto Perez, I believe he means well, and he has said some great things, okay? But he was saying something of a nuclear attack was going to happen by the end of 2011. Alright, well, that did not happen. So, either A, he is not a prophet, or B, he might have had the wrong spirit speaking to him, or C, he might have misunderstood what Yahweh was saying. Okay, because I believe that man has got some great intentions. Alright? Now, this other prophecy by this Phyllis person, it's given a time window. That this month that we're in right now, February, is going to be the month where all these banks go belly up. Alright? So keep that in mind. This is how you discern prophetic events or prophetic visions. Okay? So we have to keep that in mind. Now, again, some things could be misunderstood, and those same things could play out exactly what was read in these prophecies or visions, but maybe they just got too enwrapped and, they're getting excited and they throw a date out there. I don't know. I'm not them. I don't speak for them. But again, you still have to pay attention with what these people are saying, that they are having visions and they give dates. And if nothing happens within those dates, that means that was not a prophecy from Yahweh. If they are claiming that it came from God. Flat out. You can't compromise on the scriptures. So keep in mind, keep the month of February in mind. Now, I'm not saying anything's going to happen. Things could happen. There's things happening every day. There could be a huge event that happens. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Alright. Now, I'm going to take you to the full episode of the one from January 16th when he had a gentleman by the name of Jim Willie on his show. And this was a pretty interesting broadcast. Okay, I've already listened to it. But I gotta listen to it again with you guys because I can't switch back and forth. I have to do this all at once. That's why you probably heard me coughing in the background. But anyways, here is the full 1 hour show from January 16th of this year, 2012.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. One man, one microphone, one mission, one message. True News, the only newscast reporting the countdown to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And now for the most powerful hour on radio, here is End Time Newsman, Rick Wiles.
This is True News, 1 hour of uncensored news, views, and commentary. Welcome to the program. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Monday, January 16, 2012. And for new listeners, I want to tell you that True News is a non-commercial radio program funded entirely by our loyal audience around the world. True News is heard on the internet at TrueNews.com. There is no E in the TrueNews.com. Also at BlogTalkRadio.com. The program is broadcast over North and Central America and the Caribbean at 6 p.m. Eastern on Galaxy Satellite Transponder 19. And True News is heard internationally on 3 powerful world band radio stations. WWCR, frequency 5070, broadcast True News at 6 p.m. Eastern. World Harvest Radio transmits the program simultaneously on frequencies 5920 and 7385 at 9 p.m. Eastern. And we would broadcast on mainstream AM and FM stations, but True News is not welcome. So despite the roadblocks put in our way for 13 years, we are glad that you found True News and you're listening today. My good friend Aaron Brickman is here in the studio today. Aaron is a longtime True News listener and supporter, and he's the man who introduced me to our guest today. Aaron, welcome to your debut on True News.
Well, thank you, Rick, and it's just a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, listen, I don't want to spend very much time on the news headlines. I want to get our guest on the program right away. I'm going to go over quickly what has transpired in the world since our last broadcast on Friday evening. First, the massive joint Middle East war maneuver in Israel has been postponed. No official explanation. Over 9,000 U.S. troops have been deployed to Israel for the exercise. Israeli newspapers say the joint U.S.-Israel war exercise most likely will be held in fall 2012. London newspapers reported that U.S. economic sanctions against Iran are intended to shut down the central bank of Iran. Russia's envoy to NATO warned that a U.S. and/or Israeli attack on Tehran is the same as an attack on Moscow. The U.S. used 3 diplomatic channels to deliver a warning to Tehran not to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Iran warned Arab neighbors not to increase their oil production to replace Iranian oil if the EU bans Iranian oil purchases later this month. And Iran vowed to deliver a firm response to the assassination of another nuclear scientist. On the economic front, Standard & Poor's went on a credit rating downgrade binge. Last Friday, S&P whacked 9 European nations, including France, Italy, and Spain. And the Sunday Times reported that Greece will default within 10 weeks, most likely before March 20. And finally, a cruise ship hit a big rock and capsized near the Italian coast. Each deck on the massive ship was named for a European nation. The European shipwreck came hours after S&P downgraded a slew of European nations. Was there a sign in the shipwreck? I'll let you decide. That's essentially the top stories over the weekend. So let's try to make sense of all this stuff on this Monday, January 16, 2012. The man who can help us make sense of all this crazy news is Mr. Jim Willie. He is the author and publisher of the Hat Trick Letter, which you can subscribe to at his website, goldenjackass.com. Mr. Willie is a statistical analyst in marketing research and retail forecasting. And if you don't read his monthly newsletter, you're missing out on some seriously in-your-face reality about the crash of the paper money Ponzi scheme. As I said, my friend Aaron Brickman introduced me to Jim's newsletter, and I have been reading it with great fascination. Very honored to have Jim Willie on the program from a remote location somewhere in the world. Jim Willie, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. Good to be on board. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Listen, let's get into this. Our audience, this radio program, we've been delivering day by day reports for years as the economic system has gone into a tailspin, and so the people listening are well aware that something very sinister is underway. Do you believe that the economic crisis of the past 5 years is this just a natural consequence of bad economics, or is there something more sinister, darker at play here today?
I don't want to get into all the dark, sinister elements, but it certainly seemed to me in the mid-'90s when Alan Greenspan had his irrational exuberance and changed the way they managed money growth. They started saying, well, we're going to manage based on the consumer price index, but we were exporting inflation to the Pacific Rim back then, Asia in general, for the manufacturing. It seemed to me that they were trying to set up something that could not last. And then when most favored nation status was given in the final months of the Clinton administration to China, my ears perked up. Why would we want to do that? I mean, why would we want to export our industry, factories and all, to China? What are we going to do for legitimate income in the United States? So it seemed like something sinister was going on, and it was all pretty much confirmed in 2002 and 3 when they tried to get the interest rate so low for mortgages that it looked like they wanted the entire U.S. economy to rest on the housing bubble, which, in my opinion, and I started the newsletter in 2004, the Hat Trick Letter, in my opinion, well, you could start the clock. We've got about 3 or 4 years. That's about it, because bubbles can't last that much longer, and they're going to run out of buyers. And you saw the Fannie Mae ads appealing for black and Latino families to take out loans at the top. They were the first and principal victims.
Jim, a number of years ago when I lived in Dallas-Fort Worth, a friend gave me a ticket to a highbrow fundraising event at a big downtown Dallas hotel. It was way above my affordability, but the ticket was given to me, and he said, go in my place. And I was seated beside a senior executive for a big Wall Street firm, and he ran the Dallas operation. Anyhow, during the dinner, we started talking about world news, and I asked him this question about us shipping all of our jobs to China, and he they're just as I was handing the butter tray over to him, and he just said, well, of course, Alan Greenspan manages both economies. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, he manages the U.S. and the Chinese economy. And I said, you're telling me Alan Greenspan manages the Chinese economy? And at that moment, he realized he had just said something to a little peon that wasn't supposed to be at that banquet, and he just completely shut down.
Yeah.
So
well, there's another side to that, and that's the legitimate analysts like me. Sorry if I sound pompous calling myself legitimate, but I don't engage in fabrication and BS. I tell it like it is, and I try to strip the nonsense out and the deception out. But it seems to me that Alan Greenspan had to preside in some sense over the Chinese monetary system because they were pegged to the dollar. And there were jokes back in 02, 03, 04, and I participated in some of those jokes where we would say that the Chinese are part of the U.S. economic and financial system because they're dollar-based in a fixed way. Well, so is Hong Kong. All right, well, Hong Kong might have been the root for all that. And I'm not saying that Alan Greenspan was in charge of which factories to build in the Daegon provinces or whatever. I'm just saying he had a big hand in deciding management of recycled trade surplus, things like that, and the monetary system regarding interest rates and bank reserves. There are lots and lots of decisions where the Chinese could not veer too far off course. So that doesn't surprise me too much. It also explains why the Chinese lent the Grand Lease, the Mao Zedong gold hoard, in 1999 or 2000. That's what continued the whole game of shorting gold. Mm-hmm. The United States ran out of Fort Knox gold and started shorting a lot of London and Swiss gold, and member nation banks gold from European Union, but they ran out and they had to appeal to China. So we agreed to assist in foreign direct investment for Chinese. I think for a 2-year period it was $23 billion in China. And in return, they lent us a great deal of gold to be paid back in 2005, which we did not do, and pretty much flipped the bird in their faces. And that's why the Chinese have pretty much turned against us in the last 5 years. Pretty easy call to say that this trade cooperation would turn to rivalry, followed by trade war. Mm-hmm. That was one of my other forecasts.
Jim, as I've sat in this seat over the years, and I've tried to, keep up with these stunning developments around the world, and it's a full-time job just to keep that done. But to simplify it, to me, it looks like to me that basically the world is run by a bunch of crime syndicates, and they're just you got these mafia-type gangs that are warring against each other. You've got the U.S. side and the Europeans, you've got the Russians, the Chinese, the Vatican, you got all these groups that are out there all competing to be the top dog to run the world. And in your mind, I mean, how close are we to this warfare getting out of control, getting so red hot that these competing factions start literally duking it out, and it ends up being a disaster for millions, hundreds of millions, maybe 1 billion people around the world?
I don't know. That's a very difficult question. It's a bit out of my pay grade. It's beyond the scope of my hat trick letter.
Okay.
I frequently discuss these parties, but if I were to say I know what they're up to, I know what the plans are, I know what the execution is like, and I know what the major conflicts are, I'd be a liar. These are also the main people who can put a bullet in the back of your head. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just acknowledge that the conflict is real, to mention what I've been made aware of, that there are 30 multi-billionaires seeking control of the planet. A third of them are evil, a third of them are good, and a third of them are the swing votes. A lot is going on. I can't pretend to know what it all is, but there's no way they can keep it contained because too much is at stake. And a lot of the bad people have significant dollar investments that are cash, like entire container vessels packed with shrink-wrapped $100 bills sitting in Greek ports. So when you get that kind of stake and that kind of investment, you don't want to just say, well, we'll let that go. So there's a lot involved, and I don't really know the answer.
I mentioned in the interview about the Sunday Times in London yesterday said that Greece will default by on or before March 20. What are your thoughts on this impending Greek default?
I think that timing, did you say London Times or Financial Times?
The London Times, Rupert Murdoch's paper.
I think that's entirely believable. Honestly, it's been a miracle that Greece has hung on this long. It's been a long time since they first encountered their debt problems, and each patch job to buy them a few more months is nothing but temporary. I call them tourniquets and gauze. They're not solving anything. I remember about 4 months ago, some clients of mine said, I can't believe it, the Germans finally agreed to aid in a meaningful way. And I said, no, the politicians in Germany did. Watch the bankers nix the entire deal. And it was a matter of just like 4 days. So this Greek default is widely understood and anticipated by anyone with half a brain, and that's really not saying a large part of the population. I don't have that great a respect for the mass population. I would say not even 10% of the mass population have half a brain. So there's a lot of anticipation. It's inevitable that Greece will default. I think the losses on some of the Greek bonds, especially the shorter-term ones, they're on the order of 80 and 90% or more. The banks are bullying each other to avoid declarations of credit default because they don't want the derivatives to kick in. And they're struggling to come up with these agreements like, oh, well, let's make it a 30% haircut. Oh, no, let's make it 50. And why isn't it 80? So they're way, way off. And meanwhile, the French banks are going to croak. Not a whole lot of attention is given to the French banks. We talk about the Greeks being a mess, and now the Italian banks are in dire straits. But the main banker, the nation that serves as the main banker disproportionately for the PIGS nations is France. And I've been told that when the first Italian bank goes, there'll be a couple more instantly, followed by some French, followed by some British in London, and followed by one or two in Germany. And it'll be a flash of 10 to 12 banks as soon as one Italian bank goes. So the question really that comes up is, which nation is going to produce the first failed bank? Greece or, well, the sovereign bonds of Greece, or will it be an individual bank or group of banks in Italy? I don't know, but this time frame looks about right, and it coincides with a very vague comment that I got from a great, reliable source who refuses to provide me any more information. He said some preliminary events are going to happen on February 20th, followed by some main events. He called it a system download on March 20th. So it's very consistent with what is coming here, and I think what we're going to see is a whole lot of banks go bust, turn to dust, and have to be recapitalized. And we might get some very unusual things happen, like I'm just going to say something out of left field, Rick. Really, we might see that gold is just overnight doubled in value to help out the banks that have gold as assets.
You said you're
unfortunately, a lot of them are short gold, so anything like that's going to kill more banks. So it's very weird.
Mm-hmm. You said your source told you that he used the term system download, and that it's coming sometime in mid-March.
That's correct.
Okay.
I wish I had more details.
Okay. Did you?
I've gotten on one bent knee and asked him for details, but I got nothing in response.
Okay. Last Thursday night, I got this out of the Hindustan Times paper in India. Professor Stiglitz said that a new global monetary system is imminent, and he believes the decision will be made at the next G20 summit, and my understanding is that's March. I'm wondering if these events are tied together.
It could be where. I don't know the location of the G20. Do you know the location?
No, I don't. I'll do some quick research here while we're on the air. But I'm positive the next G20 is March, perhaps April. But he said it's imminent. He made that remark.
Well, they have a G20 almost every month now, and which is kind of interesting and very telling, because it used to be a very infrequent meeting where the G9, the G8, the G7, G7 plus Russia, or whoever you want to call it, they would meet more frequently, and the Chinese would be guests. Now we have the Chinese pretty much running the G20 and making calls about IMF gold and loans to the IMF and things like that. Stiglitz might be right, but although Stiglitz is a Nobel Prize winner and has been I think, largely a good guy, he's got some serious blind spots. And it's funny, with a lot of these economists, even who speak kindly of gold, you've got to watch what they say sometimes, because you never know where their foot is located, because that foot is usually being fed a source of money. Stiglitz has said for a long time that we've got a gradual, slow U.S. economic growth and recovery, which is a bunch of nonsense. We're stuck at -4, -3, -5% for 4 consecutive years. So if he says something is imminent, that could be, but I give much more credence to my source, and now you're confirming pretty much a parallel story, so could be.
Jim, when MF Global went down, I knew, something really ominous has happened, far worse than anything CNBC or any of the television networks were telling us here, and I tried my best to comprehend, understand it. But when I read your analysis of the MF Global debacle, I'm going to tell you what, that could make you stay up late at night, tossing and turning in bed. Okay, take a few minutes and tell our audience the significance of the MF Global crash.
Well, no short answer is possible. That was the basis of my December report. I think there were two big events that crisscrossed. One was that the sovereign bonds in Europe were starting to crater, and they couldn't just say, well, we're going to hang on and hope for the best. No, they were losing value as Basel was forcing the reserve requirements, which is another story all to itself. It looks like they're trying to force a collapse. But anyway, you had these Southern European sovereign bonds turning bad, badly impaired, turning toxic. And curiously, we're told that Corzine, who, you got to give him some credit for being intelligent, an ex-Goldman Sachs CEO. Well, why was he long on, say, Italian and Spanish government bonds? Why was he long? And I think a good answer, and I ran this by some of the smartest and most connected people I know, and they tend to agree with this line of thought, although they wouldn't describe it exactly as I would. My belief is that J.P. Morgan underwrote credit derivatives for Southern European sovereign bonds. and they demanded a patsy, and MF Global volunteered through Corzine. It could be that 10 to 12 years of Senate and governor work in New Jersey dulled his mind a bit, where he actually might have thought, or might have been told by J.P. Morgan henchmen that don't worry, Southern Europe will hang together, they'll be rescued and everything will be fine. So he might have thought, well, we're going to buy it after the bond yields have gone up, but they'll all come back and relax to normalcy, and MF Global will be made whole. Well, that didn't happen, and clearly the firm went dead. I believe MF Global served as the willing or unwilling patsy. And as things turned real sour and toxic, and it looked very clear that MF Global was going bust, they could not get in the way. They could not stop J.P. Morgan from stealing the private accounts. And I have one friend of a colleague who's involved, and I believe it's over $100,000 account loss. It's so bad that the trustee has confiscated receipts for the MF Global accounts, which means that the victims cannot prove how much they lost. It's unprecedented. It should have been handled as a brokerage firm bankruptcy, and therefore private accounts are first in line. Instead, they treated it as an equity firm bankruptcy, where the private accounts are last in line. And again, no precedent for such a brokerage house not being treated as a brokerage house for its liquidation and bankruptcy. MF Global is a futures brokerage house with clearinghouse functions and other ancillary deals. Oh my. It looked like at the same time, this is the second story, COMEX was under a lot of pressure for gold deliveries. I mean, whatever I say about gold is true, again, for silver. Silver seems to have more of a smoking gun. So here we are, late November, and a lot of contracts from accounts, legitimate accounts, are demanding delivery for gold and silver. But for gold, for the story here. As these people, perhaps hundreds of them, maybe 1,000 or more of them, were lined up at the window to receive their demands for legitimately contracted purchases of gold, they all got their pockets picked by J.P. Morgan. And the real smoking gun is that something like, I might not get these two numbers exactly right, but something like 615,000 ounces of silver were lined up for delivery to these individual accounts, and they got nothing. And then suddenly, 5 days later, J.P. Morgan received 618,000 ounces in their registered accounts. So instead of being delivered to the people, the private account holders, it all ended up in J.P. Morgan's accounts. And these people lost their money, and there's a lot of, I think, disinformation going around that these people are going to be made whole. I keep tabs with this friend of a friend, and he says, no, there's no hint of restitution. There's talk, but there's a class action suit going on. There's also a RICO, a racketeering lawsuit, class action directed at J.P. Morgan and the CME Group. That's going to be interesting to watch, because here's some really strange irony. You can't help but laugh on some of this. The criminality becomes funny after a while. If a RICO award takes place and assets are liquidated by J.P. Morgan, they'll be handed over to the U.S. government, which is controlled by J.P. Morgan.
Is this a great country or what? I mean, this is the way the syndicate operates. Aaron Brickman wants to ask you a question.
Hi, Jim. Speaking again, you have written extensively over the last month or two and spoken that you expect more MF Globals here shortly. One, can you speak to that? And also, J.P. Morgan obviously has a very large short position at the COMEX. So if we're seeing an explosion, a possible explosion in the price of gold, speak to that effect on J.P. Morgan. And I'm also hearing, though, that we could possibly see the interest decline at the COMEX, and you could have the spot price of the COMEX declined, but over in Asia you have true price discovery. Could you enlighten us on some of those topics?
Again, very large question. To begin with, regarding more MFGs happening, MF Globals happening, I think that's an absolute certainty, like the rising sun in the next several days of January. They can't help but do that because what they're facing, what the syndicate dons are facing, will we let this bank go bust or will we steal from these accounts? Will we let gold go north or will we steal from these accounts? Will we let the dollar become rejected globally or will we steal from these accounts? And I think the answer is they're going to steal from these accounts. They're going to steal everything that's not nailed down. I know that sounds very vague and blustery, but just take a look at the fine print. I know when I open up a credit card account, I try to look at some of the elements in font 2 for the fine print contracts for the opening of the account. When I open up a brokerage account of some type, I try to look at some of the font 2 fine print for the contracts, but let's face it, there are too many pages. You need a magnifying glass. And if you want to open up an account at all, you've got to do it under their terms, which has their ridiculous compulsory arbitration, and which is basically permitted rape if they see fit. The term is rehypothecation, and it seems that private accounts legally, it's not really, it's very illicit, but it's legal. It seems like a lot of private accounts are fair game for these giant financial firms to use as collateral. Now, a couple of examples I've used in the past are, what about Ameritrade? Aren't they isolated? Well, not really. Toronto Dominion, a Canadian firm, is a giant conglomerate that owns Ameritrade. Well, I had a subscriber send me a note, which is really a nice advantage about having a newsletter, is you get a lot of information come your way. And this guy said, I happen to be an employee at Toronto Dominion, and I can tell you that we have $180 million of impaired Italian sovereign debt. Okay, well, if Toronto Dominion goes bust, and I'm not saying it will, but if it goes bust, they can illegally grab all Ameritrade accounts. So here's another thing, another avenue. Just take, Brokerage House X. It doesn't really matter who they are. Who manages the provision of credit for margin purchases of stock? We'll take a look closely, and it's probably Morgan Stanley, J.P. Morgan, Citigroup, or somebody big enough to handle that kind of volume. That means that they might have the legal right to use the private accounts in a rehypothecated fashion to collateralize the provision of credit. So the back doors are all open for the syndicate to lay waste to private accounts. I mean, what about something as relatively clean as pension funds? Well, I came to learn that TIAA-CREF, for instance, bought themselves $600 million worth of farm property in Indiana and Michigan. No, not Michigan. Indiana and a couple neighboring states. Iowa. And, all right, well, that's nice, but what else do they have? And who's the broker? And where's that credit? Or do they use credit for margin? So all these different questions. You've got to do investigation of your financial account, whatever type it is. What about money markets? My gosh, I was shocked 6 or 8 years ago to learn that a money market went down to 97 cents per dollar on value. Wait, I thought money markets were supposed to earn money. Well, they had investments in mortgage bonds to earn that extra yield. There's nothing safe out there anymore.
Jim, you're saying that there are going to be a lot more MF Globals in the coming days, and you're saying that the syndicate, their back is against the wall. Either the whole Ponzi scheme is revealed and the whole thing goes down, or these guys are just going to steal everything out of every account, anything that's out there. I mean, I've been saying on this radio program for years that this is the greatest, the greatest bank robbery, the biggest bank robbery in the history of the world. But, Jim, this has worsened in recent...
Climax.
Yes, it's not only are they robbing everybody, but now they're buck naked. They're robbing the whole world, and they're naked. They don't even care. They're standing there with no clothes on, with a gun, holding up the world.
Well, at times it seems that way, and it'd be really nice if the American press did their job, but I'm afraid they're a bit subservient. Mm-hmm. That's a gross understatement. Well, now you've got J.P. Morgan and their precious metals position, but take a look at, oh gosh, I don't remember who wrote it, but it was a national security declaration under the Bush II administration, basically stating that J.P. Morgan, Citigroup, and the other big Wall Street banks can declare anything they wish for their balance sheet in the name of national security. But I think there's a back door there, too, where J.P. Morgan especially can take anything that's rotten on their balance sheet, and that includes short positions for gold, and just shove them at the Treasury, shove it at the Federal Reserve. J.P. Morgan is the Federal Reserve. So why wouldn't, take a look at some of the J.P. Morgan profit statements for the last few years. They always seem to match or beat the earnings, and they always seem to have something nice to say, and they just never encountered the disasters like Bank of America did. Well, I think that's because they shove a lot of their bad stuff at the Fed, and they just claim only their good stuff, at least for reporting. And it's all about reporting, the appearance of looking good. I believe that, Jim Sinclair has done some really fine service for the gold community. With a lot of hushed tones and a bit of looking over his shoulder, cloak and dagger type stuff at the PDAC of Toronto. This was in October of 2008. He finally revealed who he thinks is long on the opposite side for gold and silver for all these years. He said, look, it's plain. The Wall Street firms are massively short gold and silver. But who's the counterparty? And he said, it's the executives of Wall Street themselves. It's the elite. It's their individual personal accounts. So they're trashing the publicly held corporation. I mean, look at Citigroup stock, and then take a look at, say, Robert Rubin's private accounts. You think Robert Rubin is a pauper because Citigroup stock is down? I don't think so. If you take a look, you'll probably see he has significant Carlyle Group accounts where they're long gold and silver. And I don't even want to get into his story because it's just too darn dangerous and ugly. I have been saying, Rick, for quite a while now, 2 years, that when we're getting close to the actual climax, and, people use a 9-inning baseball analogy.
Right.
All right, we're somewhere in the 6th inning here. But as we're rounding the bend during the 7th inning stretch, I think MF Global was the 7th inning stretch, perhaps. But as we get close to the end, we're going to start seeing what I firmly believe will be the divergence. Notice that in the last 3 months, the gold price, as far as paper discovery and COMEX is concerned, has gone from 1,900 to about 1,600 and change, 1,650. Can you honestly say that $250 decline is also the case for physical gold? No, it's not. No, it's not. The gap is widening between physical and paper, between, this is my joke, pardon me, but, gather together $150 million of your spare money and contact your broker and find out at what price you can buy $150 million worth of gold bullion. You'll be surprised. It's not the COMEX price.
Jim,
there's a lot going on. The divergence is here, and as Ann Barnhart said regarding the MF Global fallout, things are evaporating. Clients are vanishing, accounts are closing, and the COMEX is, I think, going to become an empty warehouse.
Jim, this is Aaron. Would you then think that Eric Sprott's fund, which is currently showing around a 30% premium, is reflecting more or less fair market value?
Absolutely. In fact, if you don't have a premium in what you're purchasing, you're not purchasing what you think you're purchasing. Take a look at GLD. That's been stuck between 2 and 2.5% below the spot price. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they're paying up to get the physical? No, it means they're not buying the physical and they're shorting their own stock, taking inventory out of the back door. That's the game now for SLV for silver and GLD for gold. The custodians, and it's legal in their prospectus. They can short their own shares and take delivery to assist the syndicate. It's one of the most carefully and expertly written prospectus, I think, in modern history of financial markets.
Jim, this is Rick. How close are we to a collapse of the U.S. dollar?
Oh, I don't know. Hasn't it already collapsed?
I think you can make a case for it. I think you can make a case that it has.
It reminds me of the old argument, can you prove your mother loves you? I'm sorry, but I think the dollar is already toast. I think it's pretty much a joke. Eric Sprott called it the financial system a farce, which is an indictment against the dollar. But look at all the different revolt-type deals, bilateral deals. 3 years ago was China and Brazil. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, we heard Japan and China worked out a deal just between themselves to bypass the dollar. Iran has deals with Japan to bypass the dollar for oil sales. India and Iran have deals. Isn't it interesting that Iran is now among the few countries that are dealing with bypasses of the dollar for trade settlement?
Well, we know what happened to Muammar Gaddafi when he started talking like this. He got a big knife up his rear end the last minutes before he died. The London paper said over the weekend that a high-level official in the U.S. government, unnamed source, said that the U.S. agenda right now is to bring down the central bank of Iran.
I would imagine that you're going to see China help to prevent that, and Russia help to prevent that.
Well, Dmitry Rogosin said...
Saudis. I wouldn't even be surprised if the Saudis cooperate to prevent that. I don't think anyone wants instability at a grotesque level in the Persian Gulf.
Sorry, Dmitry Rogozin, the Russian envoy to NATO, said over the weekend, an attack on Tehran is the same as an attack on Moscow. I don't think it's hard to figure out what he means by that statement.
No, and I wrote a public article this week, and I admitted my shortcomings in geopolitics and geo-warfare, but I've got some smart military buddies who years ago explained to me that the Russians have a Sunburn missile. It's one generation ahead of the cruise. The Russians decided around 1995 that they could not achieve military superiority across the spectrum, so they went for one particular strategic weapon, and that was the Sunburn, which has, I think it's Mach 2.3 times the speed of sound, and the cruise is a little over 1, I'm not sure. The cruise has something like 200-yard accuracy, 200-meter accuracy. The Sunburn from Russia has something like 10-meter accuracy. I regard the Sunburn and its follow-up, I think it's a big brother called Onyx. These Russian missile systems are very much the stabilizing force. Now, if you're a movie advocate, you've seen Iron Man in the last few months, and Iron Man 2. These movies, they depict a stabilizing force from a superior type of weapon. And I think that with Iran equipped on their mountainsides with both Sunburns and Onyxes, that's one reason you're not going to get anything in the way of a large-scale attack. And then on top of that, you've got China and Russia, not just Russia, China and Russia, saying pretty much that Iran will be defended.
There's been a couple.
That's why we're not seeing anything happen.
Yeah, there's been a couple cryptic statements coming out of Iran in recent weeks, and it could be just blow gut hot air stuff. One Iranian military commander said that Iran possessed a hidden energy that they would use against the U.S. And then last week, an Iranian engineer said that Iran had a top secret space program, and that they had basically he alluded to like a flying saucer device that brought down the U.S. drone. He said it guided it to the ground and flipped it on its back.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I've got some parallel kind of information. It's not contradictory, but I believe that there's been some subterfuge. I don't want to give it any more description than that by some of our supposed allies in the U.S. It shared some of the software to enemy forces regarding the drones. That may have been a case for some of our own allies to make sure.
Well, what's your thought, Jim? I mean, the U.S. has been marching through the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq. It looks like we've already done Libya. Syria is next. There's already discussion over the weekend that NATO is planning a military intervention in Syria. It's going to come in the form of Arab nations leading the charge, and then on to Iran. Do you think if the U.S. and Israel attack Iran, is this going to have a pretty ending or an ugly ending?
I don't know. You mentioned one country that I don't discuss.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The country begins with the letter I. I don't discuss.
All right.
I do ask a question, though. Here's a funny little question for you. Does Syria possess any gold in their central bank? Because Libya did, 144 tons.
Yes, and do you think it's
Syria
still there?
own any gold?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they do. They're a poor nation. They don't have oil riches. They don't have mineral riches. But they might have themselves 30 or 40 tons that could come in useful.
Mm-hmm. I repeatedly said over this radio program, Colonel Gaddafi, if you're listening to me, please get your gold and run. Get out of there. They're coming for you and your gold.
He couldn't. Where's he going to go?
I know. I mean,
there's a rule in gold. You don't own any gold unless you hold your gold.
Mm-hmm.
So he had London hold his gold,
mm-hmm.
and he had Switzerland hold his gold. So how smart was he?
Yeah, the same thing happened with Slobodan Milosevic, the former country of Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist anymore because the New World Order boys just took their eraser and wiped it off the books of history. But there was a report there when Tony Blair and Bill Clinton were bombing Yugoslavia. There was a report that he was loading tons of gold on airliners and flying it out of the country. And I personally believe that's why he was held in The Hague at the prison. Naked.
So they could locate all the gold.
Yeah, he was like, tell us where the gold is at. And then after he confessed where it was at, that's the day he died naked in the solitary confinement cell.
We're told at the same time that gold is not money, though. So let's keep that in mind.
That's right. It's not.
Gold is not money, but nations will be attacked for their gold, even though it's not money. That's a very interesting dichotomy of thought.
You think this is why Hugo Chavez is flying all of his gold home from London and New York?
He's had it for a long time. This is a false story.
It is?
He's not seeking to return his gold. He's already got his gold.
Well, what's going on with this?
The Western press is telling the story that he's seeking to return his gold.
Well, what's going on?
It's already been repatriated.
Well, what's going on here with this story?
False story. It's just basic BS lies. Do you think the West, New York and London, wants to run a story? Looks like Chavez has hoodwinked us. They've gotten their 92 tons of gold, and damn, we couldn't stop them.
But why?
They're not going to tell that story. Instead, they're going to say, he's going to struggle on getting the gold back. We control it. No, it's a lie. It's a false story, just like UBS was a false story. Most stories, and it's a rule of thumb that I operate by, and it served me very well for the full 8 years of this newsletter. 80% of the stories you read are lies, but on the internet, 80% of the stories are true. So nothing's 100%, but you get a whole lot more fact and truth from the internet.
Yeah, see,
the major story coming out of Venezuela is they're struggling to get their gold out of London. Well, I got news for you. They've had it for quite some time. They're not controlling. Venezuela does not control the news media.
what is the purpose in the syndicate bringing this story out now?
They have to tell some story because Chavez is shooting his mouth off in Caracas. What are you going to do?
You mentioned, you said UBS that's not, the story that the people heard was not true. What do you mean by that?
Oh, gosh. It's another grand story, but it was basically a sting where UBS was lured into a position to put their gold at risk and try to make some fast money on the Euro-Swiss franc cross. If you look at some of the sequence of events are really quite interesting. This was back a few months ago. I think it was August or September, but there was a day when the Swiss National Bank, their central bank, came out and made a statement, well, we're going to do our best to hold this level for the Swiss franc, but we really don't think, we're going to have difficulty holding it. Well, the next thing you know, it drops 20%. They basically said, we're going to do our best to hold it, and the UBS vice president, it's not one dumb little kid rookie who made a $2.3 billion loss. It's more like a $5 to $6 billion loss that cost UBS their entire gold holdings at the bank. And I believe I also heard recently that both UBS and Credit Suisse have empty vaults in Switzerland. They don't have gold. UBS is naked of gold. They're no longer a gold player. So they had to come out with a story. You think they want to go out and say, hey, look, looks like UBS, even though vice presidents were involved in the trade, it looks like we lost all of our gold because we made a bad trade. No, blame it on some dumb kid.
Yeah, what you're telling me confirms what another source told me about a month ago. He met a businessman that he has known for years, and he said, I haven't seen you for a long time. Where have you been? He said, I've been in Europe for 4 or 5 months, and my friend said, I've got to ask you a question about the gold. And he named a specific city, and I forget the name of the Swiss city. It's outside of Zurich, and he said, I've heard some stuff about the gold. And the man laughed, and he said, Credit Suisse and Credit Suisse and UBS, they've emptied their vaults. There's no gold left there. And my friend
was
just...
Not only that, but they've got multi-billion-dollar lawsuits by allocated account holders who have not been given back their gold. I think silver is involved too. These are Swiss banks. And it's interesting that it's not in the news, which tells you who controls the news.
Are you telling Jim? Are you telling me that we have people here listening to this program right now who have gold in Switzerland being held by UBS or some of these other companies? Are you telling us that they may not have any gold there right now?
I'm not speaking for the private vault firms like Viamat.
Okay.
But if people have their gold sitting in banks like ZKB, the Zurich Cantonal Bank, and many of the other Swiss banks, UBS and Credit Suisse included, if they think they own gold, that's pretty funny. That's real funny. What they have are probably certificates. And if they try to get their gold back, they're likely to be off of cash.
Who's taking the gold?
It's long gone. It's been leased. It all started with the Rubin administration. Oh, I'm sorry, the Clinton administration. I mean the Rubin administration in 1992. I don't think Rubin started right away with Clinton, but talk about a deal with the devil. No, they leased pretty much the entirety of Fort Knox, which contains nerve gas now. It doesn't contain any gold at all. It's a nerve gas storage center. I know that from a friend of a friend who's in charge of security.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that at Fort Knox there's There's no gold. There's nerve gas.
There's no gold in Fort Knox. It contains nerve gas. That's correct. It's a nerve gas storage center. It's well guarded. Don't worry, it's well guarded.
Yeah, but where's the gold that was in Fort Knox?
Oh, it's been sold long ago. Wall Street during the Clinton years, remember how they knocked down the lease rate for gold towards zero. So that meant that the Wall Street boys, with the blessing of Robert Rubin, who was the fox in charge of the hen house, the Wall Street firms were told you can borrow this gold from Fort Knox at 0% net, and you can sell it into the market and join us, and together we'll make maybe a few $1 trillion if we get some of the futures contracts involved and treasury bonds involved. They call it the decade of prosperity. I call it the decade of stolen prosperity. That's the decade, the administration that waylaid not only Fort Knox, but raped Fannie Mae.
Jim, we're down to, I've got about 3 minutes remaining here. What would you tell the people listening? Most of our audience is U.S., Canada, Europe, and a bunch of people over in Australia and New Zealand. What should they be anticipating? What do you think the next shoe to drop is going to happen? How should they prepare for the next, say, 90 days? What are you expecting?
Well, they had better hope that they've been preparing for the last 4 years, because it's getting very late in the game. If they want to accumulate a lot of gold and silver, that's a nice plan, but it's going to be very difficult because I'm not sure a whole lot is available. The shortages are acute. The price is going down, and the shortages are getting worse. It's the exact opposite. There are two markets, the paper market and the physical market. If you want to buy, I advise people to load up on gold and silver and get it into a foreign location where it's vaulted and safe and protected by someone that they really trust. But there are going to be attacks, I think, on some of the gold that's out there, and it's just the way of the syndicate.
What places?
To the wealth.
What places offshore are remaining that's safe to take gold and valuables?
Well, New York, London, and Switzerland are clearly not.
Right.
That's where the main centers of the controversy and a lot of very suspicious activity is taking place. It's the new centers. It's the ones that are in the eastern part of the world. It's very difficult out there. Hong Kong and Dubai are very good. I don't suggest anything in Latin America. There's just no tradition of honesty, and let's face it, that's where the U.S. Treasury Department officials are going after right now. Singapore, I think, is pretty safe. It's got some questionable laws. Switzerland is really two countries. There's a sovereign nation of gold vaulting corporations. They're not really legally in Switzerland. They're their own country. So Viamat might be very good, but I just don't want to take the risk of... I don't suggest anybody take the risk of holding anything in Switzerland. I think Switzerland, it has a bankrupt financial center, and that fact has been coming out slowly. And when I heard that there are several multi-billion-dollar lawsuits against the big Swiss banks, that only confirmed that they're dead.
Jim, we're down to just a few seconds. My guest today has been Jim Willie, and he's the author and publisher of the Hat Trick Letter. It's a monthly newsletter. You can subscribe to it at goldenjackass.com. You know, over the years, I've had a lot of guests on, a lot of authors, a lot of newsletter writers, and I let them pitch their newsletters, and I don't say anything. But this is one I would recommend. This is an eye-opener, and I don't put my name on a lot of products, but I would tell you, if you got the stomach to handle what's going on out there, it's worth the money to subscribe to the Hat Trick Letter. It's goldenjackass.com. I didn't get a chance to ask Jim why he named this website the Golden Jackass. Maybe that'll be a question for a later interview. But you can go to the goldenjackass.com website and subscribe to the Hat Trick Letter.
Okay, well that's basically it. A lot of interesting information there, and now this basically dealt with the money situation, the economies, the gold and silver and all that kind of stuff, and how that ties in. Now, the key word that was mentioned in the very first segment that I played at the beginning was the word the Phoenix. Okay, and I'm gonna read you a couple articles before I close this video, and then tomorrow, like I said, or not tomorrow, or probably tomorrow, it'll probably be ready hopefully by Sunday, if not Sunday, by Monday for part 2. But mention something about the Phoenix, something called the Phoenix. Now, before I get into these 2 articles, all the stuff will be posted in the description box below, and you can go and check out these sites. But basically, what I see out of this is I see very, very soon if things really get out of hand within the next month, 2 or 3 months, then we are definitely going to be witnessing this guy right here, or the starting of it, as a worldwide situation. Of course, this guy right here, the Red Horse, talks about a great sword. Means it'll be a great war or great wars. And usually what happens with that is the economies and the money situation gets really bad. And that is what this Black Horse is. And it also talks about famines and stuff like that. A day's wages for a loaf of bread. So these 2 horses of the four seals are going to go hand in hand. And then obviously the 4th one is death. And famine, war, it's all going to go hand in hand. The white horse, I believe, is the deception of Christianity that's going on. That's been conquering and to conquer spiritually. Along with the Zionistic Judaizing of the world. I think that's what this white horse is symbolizing, and this guy has been riding for quite some time. The others have been, but in just very small doses, but I think we are going to be seeing a very increase of their rides, and it could be very interesting. But keep in mind what I said about the dates. Now, I'm going to read you this real quick before I close. Okay? This was from 1988. The Economist magazine, or The Economist, ran an article titled "Get Ready for the Phoenix," in which they wrote, 30 years from now, Americans, Japanese, Europeans, and people in many other rich countries, and some relative poor ones, will probably be paying for their shopping with the same currency. Prices will be quoted not in dollars, yen, or D-marks, but in, let's say, the Phoenix. The Phoenix will be favored by companies and shoppers because it will be more convenient than today's national currencies, which by then will seem a quaint cause of much disruption to economic life in the late 20th century. The article stated that the market crash of 1987 taught governments that the pretense of policy cooperation can be worse than nothing, and that until real cooperation is feasible, i.e. until governments surrender some economic sovereignty, further attempts to peg currencies will flounder. Amazingly, the author of the article adds that several more big exchange rate upsets, a few more stock market crashes, and probably a slump or two will be needed before politicians are willing to face squarely up to that choice. This point to a muddled sequence of emergencies followed by patch-up followed by emergencies, stretching out far beyond 2018, except for two things. As time passes, the damage caused by currency instability is gradually going to mount, and the very trends that will make it mount are making the utopia of monetary union feasible. The article advocated the formation of a global central bank, perhaps through the IMF, and this means a big loss of economic sovereignty, but the trends that make the phoenix so appealing are taking that sovereignty away in any case. The article concludes in stating that the phoenix would probably start as a cocktail of national currencies, just as a special drawing right is today. In time, though, its virtue against national currencies would cease to matter, because people would choose it for its convenience and the stability of its purchasing power. The last sentence says, pencil in the phoenix for around 2018, or sooner, and welcome it when it comes. Former U.S. Federal Reserve Governor Paul Volcker has said that if we are to have a truly global economy, a single world currency makes sense. A European Central Bank executive stated that we might one day have a single world currency, in a step towards the ideal situation of a fully integrated world. The IMF held a conference in the year 2000 discussing how the world was segmenting into regional currency blocks, and that a single world currency was possible, and that it is, in fact, preferable. Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Mundell has long advocated the creation of a global currency, and that it would restore a needed coherence to the international monetary system, give the International Monetary Fund a function that would help it to promote stability, and be a catalyst for international harmony. In March 2009, Russia suggested that the G20 meeting in April should consider the possibility of creating a supranational reserve currency, or a super reserve currency, and to consider the IMF's special drawing rights, SDRs, and the capacity, 38 a week, capacity. A week later, China's central bank governor proposed the creation of a global currency controlled by the IMF, replacing the US dollar as the world reserve currency. Also using the IMF's SDRs as the reserve currency basket against which all other currencies would be fixed. We've heard this before, and that's not gone away. That's still going on. I firmly believe that. Days after this proposal, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner, former president of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, told the Council on Foreign Relations that in response to a question about the Chinese proposal, we're actually quite open to that suggestion. But you should think of it as rather evolutionary, building on the current architectures rather than moving us to global monetary union. In late March, a UN panel of economists recommended the creation of a new global currency reserve that would replace the US dollar. and that it would be an independently administered reserve currency. Now, this was from well, there's not really a date, but it is it's an article from New Dawn magazine. But it doesn't have a date. I know it's pretty old. Obviously, it's not. It's either 2010 or 2011. I believe this probably was written, but this does not have a date. But I will give you the link, and if you find a date, then let me know. But anyways, the Phoenix, very interesting. Now, I'm gonna go into this whole thing about the Phoenix, and we're gonna dive into the symbology. We're gonna dive into the secret societies, and why would they call this currency the Phoenix if they are gonna call it that? Okay, like I said, I'm not saying that this is a for sure thing. I'm just looking at possibilities here. And why would they do that? What is the Phoenix? What is the reason why they could call this thing the Phoenix? That's all things that we're going to be discussing in the next video. But until then, I appreciate your patience for sticking through with this one. And until next time, stay tuned for part 2. And then we're going to be discussing a whole lot more. It's going to get very interesting. But stay tuned for that. So until next time, truth be told, truth be known. Stay safe. God bless everybody. Stay safe. Shalom. Bye-bye.